A man named Nick is accused of killing his wife after she goes missing. In the midst of the investigation, he goes to his father's house to find something, but the security alarm keeps ringing, so the cops see him there. After he leaves, the cops then search the house and find his wife's diary inside an incinerator. A few days earlier, Nick leaves his house and heads to his bar. As he arrives, his sister Margot suspects that his mood is off, so she asks if it has to do with his wife, Amy. Nick then mentions that it's his and Amy's 5th wedding anniversary, and Margot jokes about how fast the years have passed. She asks if he and Amy will do their usual anniversary treasure hunt, and Nick says he has never really been interested in them. After a while, Nick gets a call from his neighbor that his cat is outside. Nick immediately heads back home, but as he then takes the cat back into the house, he notices that the door is open. While moving around, he then sees the living room table shattered. This leaves him confused, but because he can't find Amy, he believes something might have happened. He immediately calls the police, and after a while, a detective named Rhonda is accompanied by an officer named James to check his house. As they get there, Nick tells them his wife is missing. The cops then check the house, and shortly after, Rhonda starts marking spots around the house that should be checked by the forensics team. As she gets to the kitchen, Rhonda sees a very small blood stain near the cabinet, so she marks it. A while later, Nick follows the cops to the police department. He is then told to find somewhere to spend the night because the forensics team will analyze the whole place. The cops then ask Nick several questions about his wife and how their marriage is going, but he seems reluctant to answer. Rhonda also asks if his wife has a friend, but he says she has none. After he then mentions that he hasn't called his wife's parents, the cops allow him to do that. While making the call, he suddenly sees his dad arguing with a cop. As he intervenes, he learns that his dad walked away from the care home he's staying. Following this, Rhonda lets Nick take his dad back to the care home. Later on, Nick stays at Margot's house for the night. Elsewhere, Rhonda and James return to the crime scene. As they're about to walk in, a lady named Noelle approaches them and claims to be Amy's best friend. She also says she'd like to help with the investigation, but Rhonda tells her that she'll be contacted later. After entering the house, the forensics team leader informs Rhonda that the stain on the cabinet is blood. As James also checks some papers, he informs Rhonda that the house, credit cards, and even Nick's bar are in Amy's name. After going around the house, they also find an envelope with the word "clue" written on it. The next morning, Nick arrives at the police department and sees that Amy's parents have arrived. After he meets them, they head to a press conference where they announce that they'd appreciate the public's help in finding Amy. When they leave the press conference, Rhonda asks Nick and Amy's parents if there's anyone who might have something against Amy. Her parents then mention a guy named Desi, who has liked Amy since high school and never seemed to stop contacting her. Nick confirms that he knows about it, but her parents then mention another guy named Tommy, who he doesn't know. Her parents then add that Tommy was Amy's last boyfriend who assaulted her and even got arrested for it. After the questioning, Rhonda then calls Nick aside to ask about the clue that was found in the house. Nick sees it and says it's part of a treasure hunt for their anniversary. He then picks the card and decodes the first one. It leads him to his office, and there he finds another card. As he then tries to decode it, Rhonda looks around and finds a red underwear hidden inside the office. She asks who it belongs to, but Nick says he has no idea. He also mentions that he doesn't know what the next clue means. However, it turns out he knows that it leads to his father's old house. He then goes there alone, but as he enters the house, the security alarm starts ringing. Nick types in the right code to shut off the alarm, but it doesn't work. As he then looks around, he sees another clue. Before he can have a look, Rhonda arrives at the scene, so Nick hides the clue. He then tells her that he only came to check his father's house. The next day, Nick arrives at the place where Amy's parents have rounded up volunteers to help find their daughter. While he's there, he sees Desi and immediately informs Rhonda, but she says he might want to help. She then asks him about Noelle, but he says that he and Amy don't even know her well. While Desi is leaving, Nick follows him, but eventually stops. A woman then meets him and asks for a picture. He smiles in the picture, so he realizes his mistake and tells the woman to delete it, but she refuses. The picture eventually goes viral, and a talk show host named Ellen starts a campaign against Nick for smiling when his wife is missing. As he gets home that night, Margot asks if she needs to know anything, but he says he hasn't hidden anything from her. Later that night, Nick's lover, Andy, surprisingly shows up at Margot's house and says she misses him. Nick immediately tells her to leave because no one must see them together, but she refuses to do so because it's likely the last time they'll see each other in a while. He eventually lets her spend the night, though he sneaks her out in the morning so that Margot won't see her. However, just as Andy leaves, Nick sees Margot in the kitchen and realizes that she now knows about his affair. Margot yells at him for lying about having no secrets, but Nick says he was scared of telling her. As they watch Ellen's show that morning, the host insists that Nick has a hand in his wife's disappearance. However, a defense attorney on the show named Tanner defends him, so Margot tells Nick to try to hire the lawyer. Elsewhere, Rhonda and James meet a guy in the dangerous part of town to ask if he has seen Amy before. As he sees her picture, he says he saw her once when she came to buy a gun. Rhonda and James then look shocked because something might have forced her to think of getting a gun. The next day, a new report from the forensics department shows that blood was mopped off the kitchen floor. That night, while at a vigil to speak to the volunteers on Amy's case, Nick appeals to everyone to trust him. While they're clapping for him, Noel shows up and asks where he kept his pregnant wife. Nick then runs away from the scene as he doesn't know what to say. When he gets home, Rhonda and James ask if Amy was really pregnant, but he says that Noel was lying because she never even knew Amy. However, Rhonda shows him pictures of his wife with Noel, but he says he didn't know about it. Rhonda then mentions the mopped blood and suggests that Amy might have been killed. She also shows him a list of expensive purchases on his wife's credit cards, but he says he didn't buy any of the things there. As she then receives a call, she finds out that based on Amy's medical records, she was indeed pregnant. After hearing this, Nick smashes his wine glass on the floor and tells Rhonda that he'll no longer speak to her until he has a lawyer. That night, while speaking on the phone with Amy's parents, Nick mentions that Amy didn't even want a baby. Margot hears him saying this and asks why he lied because she knows he's the one who didn't want a baby. Nick then mentions that he lied about not wanting a baby because he didn't want Margot to hate Amy. While Margot still feels he's lying, he shows her proof that he went to a fertility clinic that eventually sent him a letter telling him to show up or they'd have to destroy a sample. Elsewhere, Rhonda and James head back to Nick's father's house because they believe he came there for something. As they then look around, they find Amy's diary inside the incinerator. After looking through, they see the last entry where Amy writes that her husband might kill her. That night, Nick thinks of solving Amy's next clue. As he finally does this, it leads him to Margot's woodshed, where he finds many things that got purchased under his name with Amy's credit cards. He immediately calls Margot to check it, and they both realize that Amy is trying to frame him for her murder. They also find a present inside the woodshed, which includes a coded note in which Amy implies that she's going to send Nick to prison. Since the death penalty is also legal in their state, they realize that Amy wants Nick dead. Surprisingly, it turns out that Amy is actually alive, and she only left town so that her husband would be framed for her murder. 2 years into their marriage, Amy and Nick had financial problems after losing their jobs. They then had to rely on Amy's trust fund money. Despite this, she eventually finds out that he's having an affair, so she decides to punish him by staging a murder and leaving clues to help the police come to the conclusion that he indeed killed his wife. As part of her plans, she becomes friends with Noel and steals the woman's urine sample so that she'll also have a record of being pregnant. She also lies to Noel about how violent Nick gets because he doesn't want a baby. Amy then writes a diary and leaves it inside the incinerator, after which she changes the alarm code in the house. On the day of her anniversary, she then stages the crime scene and leaves the house in her getaway car. She also cuts her hair and dyes it to look different. With the cash she has, she eventually rents an apartment and keeps up with the investigation while hoping that her plan works, and everyone hates Nick. 2 days after getting her apartment, she meets her neighbor, Greta, who talks a lot. Amy then lies about her name being Nancy, but she avoids talking too much because she doesn't want to make any friends. After a while, she also meets another neighbor named Jeff, who is friends with Greta. The next day, Nick goes to meet Tanner to see if he can take up his case. After hearing that it's a fake murder planned by Amy, Tanner finds it interesting and decides to take up the case. He also mentions that they need to find a way to get people to stop thinking of Amy as a sweetheart. Following this, he advises Nick to speak to anyone from Amy's past who might have something against her. Nick mentions Tommy, so Tanner advises him to visit the man. The next day, Nick finds him, and while they start talking, Tommy mentions that Amy framed him for the assault. He also mentions that when he saw that she was missing on TV, he immediately knew she was probably lying about being murdered. After Nick leaves there, he also goes to see Desi, who refuses to talk to him about why he broke up with Amy. Later on, Nick meets with Tanner and Margot. He then tells them that the places he found, the 3 clues, were places he used to hook up with Andy. Since they already know about the red panties Amy planted in his office as well as the things in Margot's woodshed, Tanner says there must have been something in his father's house. When they get there, though, it turns out the house has been sealed, so Tanner suggests that the police might have found something really incriminating. As they then head to a restaurant, Tanner asks if Nick has heard from Andy, but he says he hasn't. He then suggests telling the police about her before she exposes him. Elsewhere, Amy looks happy after watching how Ellen attacks Nick on her show. When she gets home, she then calls the police to report some unusual activity around Margot's woodshed. The next night, while playing a game with Greta and Jeff, her purse falls, and they see that she has a lot of cash with her. She lies that it's nothing serious, but they don't believe her. The next day, while she's then clearing her apartment so she can leave, they eventually attack and steal the money from her. Following this, she immediately leaves the area, but with nowhere to go, she calls Desi. On the 6th day of Amy's disappearance, Tanner tells Nick that he'd have to appear on a talk show hosted by a lady named Sharon so he can talk about Andy. Even though he thinks it's going to make him look bad, Tanner and Margot train him on what to say. Elsewhere, Amy meets with Desi and asks for his help. She tells him that she had to run away from home because Nick was going to kill her, so Desi agrees to help. Meanwhile, when Sharon arrives for the show, it turns out that Andy has already spoken to the press and exposed Nick. Sharon is angry about this, but Nick still tells Tanner that he'd like to go on with the interview. After the interview, Nick appears to do very well, and Tanner praises him. That night, Desi takes Amy to his house. He tells her that she has everything she needs, and that he's happy she came back to him. Before he leaves her alone, he tells her that she has nothing to be scared of because he has cameras around the house. The next morning, when Desi is not around, Amy looks around the house to see where the cameras are. That night, Nick's interview with Sharon finally airs, and there, he acknowledges that he was a bad husband. As he also mentions that he thinks his wife is still alive, Sharon tells him to send her a message. He then faces the camera and tells Amy that if she comes back, he'll be a better husband. Amy looks very interested while watching the interview, but Desi doesn't like the fact she's still bothered about Nick. As he insists that he'd like them to become lovers, she pretends to cry and says she needs more time. Elsewhere, the cops show up at Margot's house to arrest her because of the things in her woodshed. Nick tries to plead for his sister, but Rhonda doesn't care. He eventually calls Tanner, and they head to the police department together. While Nick is then being questioned about the things in his wife's diary, he agrees that certain entries are true. However, he insists that he knows nothing about his wife's pregnancy, her decision to buy a gun, and her accusation that he might kill her. Despite this, Rhonda asks if it's his wife's handwriting, and he says it is. Shortly after, Nick is arrested. After a while, though, Tanner gets him and Margot released. Elsewhere, Amy starts acting really nice toward Desi. Before he leaves for work, she bites his lip while kissing him, so he starts bleeding. As he wonders what's happening, she scatters his hair and loosens a part of his shirt that's already tucked in. She then tells him that it's how kids wear their shirts these days. As he leaves, the camera at the entrance picks him cleaning his bloody lip and tucking back his shirt. Amy then stains her gown with red wine, after which she goes near the door and starts crying so that it will appear on the camera like Desi just assaulted her. When Desi arrives from work, Amy seduces him so he'd sleep with her. While they're together, she then slits his throat and watches him die. The next morning, Amy arrives at the house with blood all over her body, leaving Nick and the press people outside shocked. She is immediately taken to the hospital, and the doctor confirms to Nick and Rhonda that her injuries are consistent with sexual assault. Rhonda then asks what Nick thinks, but he says he doesn't even believe the kidnapping story Amy is trying to tell. While she's then being questioned by the FBI with Rhonda also present, Amy narrates how Desi hit her with a stick and took her to his house, where he always left her tied. Rhonda then interrupts and asks if she saw all the stuff that was hidden in Margot's woodshed when she went to hide the present. She says she just ignored it because she knew her husband had reckless spending habits. As she continues her story, Rhonda asks why Amy wrote about the abuse Nick subjected her to. Amy says it's true that Nick hurt her, but she loves him. She also stops Rhonda from asking any more questions, saying that if the detective was left with the case, she'd have put Nick on death row. Rhonda can't believe this, and the FBI then asks Amy if she'd be okay with going home with her husband, and she says she'd love to. Following this, Nick takes Amy home. As they get there, he tells her to stop pretending to love him, but she says she's not. He then tells her that he lied on Sharon's show because it's what he knew she'd want to hear. However, she says it's what makes her love him because he knows her too well. He then asks if she killed Desi, but she tells him to take off his clothes because she wants to be sure he's not wearing a wire. She eventually confesses to him and says she did it so she could save Nick from going to jail. Before she then goes to bed, he asks if she was really pregnant, but she confirms that she wasn't. Later on, Nick complains to Tanner, Rhonda, and Margot about having to live with Amy. They agree that she's quite good at telling a story, and there's also no loophole. Tanner eventually says he's leaving because Nick is no longer at risk. Nick says he is, but Tanner just advises him not to piss Amy off. Nick then asks Rhonda to do something, but she says she can't. Following this, Nick heads back home. That night, when he can't sleep, Amy sees him and offers to tuck him into bed in the room he's now staying in. After doing this, she tells him that he can always sleep in the same room with her, but he says he still needs some time. She then says that she'd never do anything to hurt him. 7 weeks after Amy returns home, she invites Ellen to interview her and Nick. While she's deciding what to wear, Nick goes to inform her that Ellen has arrived. Before he leaves, she tells him to open the box on her drawer. He says he doesn't want any gifts, but she insists. When he opens it, he sees that it's a pregnancy test pen showing that she's pregnant. Nick tells her he didn't touch her, but she says he didn't need to because she used the sample he left at the fertility clinic. Nick gets angry and tells her that no matter what she does, he'll still leave. Before he walks away, she then mentions that if he leaves, she won't have to teach his child to hate him. Nick gets angry and insults her as he slams her head against a wall. However, she says he's stuck with her. She also mentions that no one else can boast of killing someone for him. Following this, he then follows her to the interview, where she makes him announce that she's pregnant. Later that day, Nick meets Margot and tells her that he has no choice but to stay because of the child. Margot can't believe this and she advises him against it, but he says she has to understand that it's what he has to do.